Hi, everyone. This is Steve Delisant, and welcome to this week's edition of CEOs You Should Know. I'm thrilled to be joined by Brian Lobley, the Chief Executive Officer of Tango. Brian, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
We're thrilled to jump in to learn more about Tango as well as your personal journey.
Great. Looking forward to it.
So let's kick it off. I know you spent more than 2 decades in healthcare, leading major organizations like Independence Blue Cross before joining Tango. What initially drew you to the healthcare industry?
Honestly, I backed into it. So after school, moved to D.C. So I'm a Philly guy. Moved down to D.C., do IT consulting. I was an engineer. So kind of my graduating class in the early 2000s, everybody went into consulting. So I started working actually with the federal government on a financial services project that was quite boring. And I wanted to move back to Philly. So I moved back and got a job as an analyst at Independence Blue Cross. And honestly, to be totally transparent, I could have done that anywhere. It wasn't like I picked healthcare. I joined e-commerce. So at the time, think about early 2000s, like you could do all kinds of cool stuff in financial services. You could check your, take a picture of your check. It would be money be ready the next day. Healthcare, nothing. You can do anything online. So it was really cool to have this challenge of like modernizing healthcare and bringing kind of healthcare into the like internet age, for lack of a better term. But really that like 5-6 years, I could have really done that anywhere. It was just like process re-engineering stuff. And then about 5 or 6 years in, we were going through a merger that ultimately failed. And we were, heading on a path to go left. Merger failed, and it was like, where are we going to go right? Mm-hmm. And I was part of a team that actually was kind of charting that new path. So ultimately, I became our chief strategy officer. Pretty young, pretty kind of fortunate to be in the right place at the right time, and then fell in love with healthcare from there on out. And, 25 years later, still doing it.
How have you seen it really evolve over time from like the start to where you are now?
Yeah. People use the word like transformation all the time. And I really think this is an industry that has gone through it, probably in the middle of kind of where we're going to be ultimately. And still, AI is obviously like the next kind of evolution. But, when I started, it was always a cost issue, right? Mm-hmm. Kind of a big part of the GDP, but now it's over 25% of the GDP. It's personal for everyone. There's an affordability crisis. And I think what I've noticed most, especially maybe in the last 5 to 6 years, there's been a lot more focus on the experience of healthcare versus maybe just the cost problem. So it's almost exciting to see a little bit of a shift, even in like the public perception of saying, hey, like patients matter, put patients first. It was really transactional like 20 years ago.
It's a good shift.
Yeah, it's a great shift.
Yeah, absolutely. I know transitioning from a large enterprise corporation like Independence Health Group to more of an innovative-driven company like Tango had to be a big shift, right? What inspired that move, and what did you learn from leading both of those organizations?
Honestly, I was looking for something where kind of every day the impact mattered. So at Independence, the great thing about it is scale matters in health insurance.
Of course.
So in Philly, right, we had a very, very large impact, and we could work with really big customers like Comcast, Urban Outfitters. We always say Philly's the biggest small town in America, right? So a lot of small businesses. So that was great. But really every day, every hour almost, there was a different issue, right? And kind of bringing it to completion took a lot of time. Loved it, had an amazing time. But I think the transition for me was more about how can I make an impact and kind of look back over every week and say, okay, we actually like made an impact on a patient. We can like translate it down to that level. So that was great. And then I think on the side of the business I'm in now, it allows me to kind of more intermediate between payers and providers as opposed to kind of being on that insurance side where you're only focused on like that almost battle with the hospitals and doctors. Now it's like, hey, how do we come together about the patient? So it's been incredibly rewarding, fun, exciting. And now with like a smaller team, it's like I get to work with everybody versus
that's awesome.
Just seeing people in an elevator.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you mentioned the town a few times, Philly, right?
Yep.
So Philly seems to have played a big role in shaping who you are as an individual, as a leader, everything from your work ethics to your values. How has that hometown really influenced your leadership style over the years?
Well, I even moved back, right? Because I was like, got to go home to Philly. Yeah, it's played a big part, right? I think the stories that you hear, especially on the sports side, it's kind of that passion. But like I always go back to the grit, right? Yep. And it's about working hard and not being outworked. So both my parents worked for the city. My mom was a crossing guard. My dad was a Philly cop. I learned that you're going to be around smarter people, but you should never get outworked. And I think that's like the Philly kind of ethos.
Mindset, yeah.
It's the mindset. So it's something that I've taken with me in, personal and professional endeavors, right? Like don't be outworked, right? That is something where, think if you keep that at like the heart, you're going to be successful over time.
Awesome. I know that we talked about how you've led different teams, right? Everything from operations to technology to strategy. How do you foster that culture of innovation, but still maintain that operational excellence within the organization?
Yeah, we have a mantra here. So I have an opportunity where I talk to every new person that joins Tango. So we do a new hire orientation like every third Monday. So
Awesome.
anybody that's joined the organization, I get to an opportunity to talk to them. And I kind of live in an airport right now, so I have like this background music almost. But what I love is that kind of notion of if you see something, say something.
Hmm.
So I think that's like critically important when you're trying to foster any kind of change, right? Certainly from an innovation standpoint, but also even from operational excellence. So I kind of preach to everybody that if you see something, say something, right? You're going to have your job, but like every job is like an input and an output. So
Sure.
like pay attention to like what you're getting in and pay attention to what you're giving out, and then look for opportunities across people, process, and technology to improve that. And I think that really, I think that kind of permeates through the organization if you keep saying it, and certainly if it comes maybe from the CEO, I think people embrace that. So it's been a fun time that like anybody can innovate across the organization, but like make sure the trains are moving still.
Yeah, it's a great motto.
Yeah.
Speaking of innovation, I know Tango's home first model represents that shift from the traditional care to really that tech enabled at home care. How do you encourage the team to think of opportunities like that and to continue to innovate within the healthcare space?
Yeah, it's funny. I think maybe there's a perspective that's hard to innovate in healthcare because there's so many regulatory
Yeah.
challenges and things like that. And I think when you have something like what we do, which is home first, you can kind of start with the perception of that's where like when people are sick, like if you wake up sick, where do you want to be? You want to kind of stay in bed
In
at
your own
home,
bed, yeah.
right? So like we
Absolutely.
can lead with that. And I think if you start kind of with that motto to say our preference is how quick can we get someone home, it allows you to kind of innovate in a little bit more of a, I want to say constrained way. And that sounds negative, but you've already set the guardrails.
Hmm.
So now you kind of know to color within the lines, and it makes it a little bit easier for everyone to say, okay, if I lead home first, if I think about how do I get someone home and keep them home, like that becomes, again, kind of the standard bearer for us.
It's a great motto. I know you spoke earlier about really loving the new role because of the mission and being able to give back, right? And that mission and purpose has always been really, I know, front and center of your leadership style. How does that translate into the day-to-day operations at Tango and really translate into the long-term strategy that you see?
First, I believe, mission and purpose is culture, right?
Hmm.
So I think you have to kind of continually to do a connect to purpose for your employees. So we start every meeting, whether it's a board meeting, a town hall meeting, even when I do my kind of CEO meet and greets with a member story. So like make sure you understand what we're doing every day, connect to a member, connect to purpose. That leads to culture, right? I think when you have those two things and people kind of understand that like every part of the organization is making a difference and it's making a difference in a patient's life,
Yep.
I think it's very easy to kind of be aligned from a culture standpoint and continue to kind of reinvent or improve the business model.
Yeah, it's probably very motivational for them to know what they're ultimately working to
Exactly.
accomplish.
You kind of see grandma or grandpa kind of getting better
Yeah.
from your services. It's rewarding.
That's awesome. There's been a growing demand for home-based care. Where do you see the greatest opportunities for Tango to really make an impact over the next few years?
So like there's this silver tsunami, right? So like all kind of baby boomers are becoming Medicare eligible and the kind of the demographics are changing.
Sure.
And I think as that begins to change, we kind of meet the moment here, and meeting the moment is making sure more people can get home care access. There are certain states, like even here in New York, you go to upstate New York, there is like just a complete gap in home health.
It's crazy.
There's just not enough providers here. So our model is to say, hey, we want to reward providers for what we call like the total cost of care. So if they're keeping you out of a hospital readmission or out of the emergency room, like that's a big savings ultimately to the insurer. So we actually reward the providers back with that. So kind of our hope is really we can kind of enable better access, and we lead with that. So we try to get a patient seen within 48 or 72 hours post-discharge. If you get home and a nurse shows up at your house within those 2 or 3 days, you are like 30% less likely to show back up into the hospital or show back up in the emergency room during that episode. So that's what we're trying to do. And we can't do it like across 50 states. So we're taking these like really big, impactful states.
Yeah.
We call it land and expand, and really try to be multi-payer, multi-provider in those states like Texas and Pennsylvania, Arizona, others like that.
That's great. And like you said, it's mutually beneficial. It's for the patient to be home, but also for the hospitals. I'm sure.
Absolutely, because they want to free up the bed.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that also value-based care has been a passion of yours, making it more affordable, and making sure that true success lives within that value-based ecosystem. How has Tango really been contributing to that vision?
We have a value-based only mindset, right? So when we approach an insurance company, because that's who our ultimate customer is, it is all about making sure it's value-based and getting that what we call stakeholder alignment. So again, if you're a home health agency and you're showing up 12, 13, 14 times within 30 or 60 days, someone discharged, you're having a really impactful moment. It's like episodic, right?
Yeah.
So during those 30 or 60 days, we're making sure you get all the compensation for all the great work that you've done. So we share those savings back, where a lot of traditional models are just fee for service, right?
Yep.
It's like I always used to call it like a credit card, right? You show up, swipe, that's a service. Next day, show up, swipe, that's a service. Well, we've put this whole kind of value-based model kind of across it, and it's been very, very well adopted to date. So hopefully to continue to expand that.
That's awesome. If someone's tuning in that's in a leadership role and they want to make that shift from fee to service to more value-based care, how would you recommend that they do that? And what are the barriers that exist, and how can they kind of overcome some of those to make a meaningful change?
I think you have to start in something kind of bite-sized, like I say, episodes,
Sure.
right? So if you look at like global health, I'm going to keep you healthy throughout the whole year. Well, there's a lot of people that hands play in that, right? Your primary care doc, maybe a specialist if something pops, certainly the surgeon if you have to go in. So I like kind of breaking it down into more bite-sized pieces. So what is something that's like truly impactful and rewarding, and you can actually point to your impact on it? So if you can get to that where you're saying, hey, there's not 5, 6 people splitting the dollar, there's like 2, right? Then your incentives are aligned. So I think it always starts with aligned incentives. And I mean, it's easier said than done, but there's certain places that I think it's really making an impact.
Yeah,
and
the payoff's big too.
It's very big.
That's awesome. I know that we talked about this a little bit earlier, that the healthcare industry sometimes can be complex. And I know that it faces constant pressures from regulatory changes to workforce challenges. What have been some of those toughest leadership lessons that you've learned while navigating all the dynamics of the healthcare space?
I think it's very easy to go in your silo and say, hey, I'm working my specific problem. I will tell you, I think healthcare is the ultimate team sport, right? Like you got to figure out all the different stakeholders, and you can't say as an insurance company, you're going to solve the cost crisis. As a hospital system, you're going to solve inpatient. You got to look at it holistically and say, how do we all come together, get around the table, and in some ways leave the egos at the door, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, insurance, people think, oh, you're managing risk, just like life insurance, auto insurance. Well, it's not, right? If we have to use health insurance, it's like highly personal, right? Like you're having an issue. So I think kind of bringing that back into like this team sport or teamwork dynamic is really important, and bringing everybody to the table versus maybe giving someone a solution.
That's awesome. For emerging healthcare leaders that are trying to do it all, right? Balance mission, innovation, impact. What advice would you give them based on your own experience?
Work with great people, right? Teams matter. So I kind of consider myself a culture warrior. So like when I hire people or, maybe bring people into a different organization, it's like, it starts with culture first. Like you gotta like the person you're walking across the table from. At the end of the day, probably in our work career, we're spending more time, in that, 20 to 60-year-old with your work colleagues, your family.
Mm-hmm.
So like embrace that family mentality and say like, I like the person across the table with me, and I want to like, get in the, in the pit with them together.
Yeah.
So good people matter.
Absolutely. So what's next? What's next for Tango? Any exciting developments or expansions on the horizon?
Yeah, so we started this year in January in 4 states: Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico. And we had about 500,000 Medicare Advantage lives. This year alone, we've added Pennsylvania, Texas, Oregon, and Ohio. So we added 300,000 members.
Exciting.
And then in first quarter, we're adding 3 more states: Michigan, Tennessee, and more lives in Oregon. And we'll add another 800,000 to 900,000 members. So we'll go from that 500,000 to 1.6 million by the end of first quarter. So
Congrats.
yeah, thank you.
Excited to see the expansion. So we've covered a lot, but if there's one thing you want our listeners to take away about the mission of the organization, what would that be?
That home first is the way to do post-acute care, right? So always think about kind of yourself, make it personal. Like, where do you want to recover? Like we talked about earlier, like you're sick, chicken noodle soup at home, like that makes you better, right? So that's kind of our mentality, is prioritize the home first, and we want to get you there as quick and at the right time. So that's the Tango mission.
It's awesome. Lastly, if there's one call to action, if anyone that's tuning in wants to learn more about Tango, what should they do?
Definitely home health matters, and there is, again, a just gap in both the reimbursement and the number of nurses that are going into this field. So I would say kind of support the industry,
Sure.
and kind of realize that this type of nursing and care at home is really, really important. So support the reimbursement changes and support a model like Tango.
Awesome. And if they wanted to learn more about tango in particular, what should they do?
Yeah, check out our website, tangocare.com. Connect with me on LinkedIn, and look forward to more partnership with people.
Awesome. Well, Brian, thank you so much for sharing your journey, learning more about the healthcare industry overall, and especially all the amazing work you're doing with Tango. We're excited to see you guys continue to expand and grow and see what's on the horizon.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the time today.
We appreciate it. And we appreciate everyone tuning in this week. Tune in next week for next week's edition of CEOs You Should Know.